TDEP, are you here? There we are. Okay. Well, hey TDEP.
Hi everyone.
Hey. Welcome. I think we have enough folks to kick it off. I quickly want to say hi from Denver, everybody. Today I attended a session on privacy and other stablecoins and had a lot of amazing insights that I can't actually bear to share with folks here. But that's for another forum because this forum is dedicated to protocol improvements. And with that, I think everybody already knows TDEP. He's a longtime community member, very important member of the community. And TDEP has come up with a proposal to change, or not really to change, but suggest improvements to how the bump mechanism works for state archival on Sorbonne. And today we'll be talking about that. And TDEP, I'd love it to if you start from the motivation, like why is this, discuss the problem, why it's important, and then the show is yours. So take it away.
Yeah, for sure. Do you guys want me to share the screen in
Yes,
order to share the proposal, or
that'd be great.
okay? Okay, so I believe you can all see here. So yeah, I mean this proposal is quite simple. I mean it's very straightforward, and it's not really a big change. But it's I mean at least in my opinion it's quite useful because it allows to yeah, for sure. I mean, the main motivation behind this, besides clarity on the host environment, is to enable for better distribution within the rent costs. So what we've seen as of now is that rent costs are pretty much, I'm not sure if they're the most expensive thing, but they surely are one of the most expensive costs when dealing with Soroban. And the contract code itself is quite a big entry for the ledger, so of course it will be quite expensive to keep on the ledger and retain it. So with this change, what I think can happen is that for contracts that I mean whose code is used by more instances. So imagine, for example, a liquidity pool that has many instances with many asset pairs, but these all point to the same code. With this change, they can set lower time to live and lower thresholds for the code in order for the bumps to be better distributed among all the users of all the other pools. And yeah, this is pretty much the main motivation. The other one is probably clarity on the host environment. So I don't think this change will impact much on the SDK side unless you're specifically looking into bumping instance and code by different TTLs or thresholds. But yeah, this would pretty much mean, let me go to the PR here, that we now have.
I was going to say, if I understand correctly, are you basically saying that allow right, like we have to Sorbonne has data archival, which means that you have to pay for data to live on the ledger. So are you basically suggesting here that there should be different methods for bumping WASM/code and a different method for bumping instance storage? Is that right? Did I understand correctly?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Like the main point here. Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Why is that? Like, one thing I don't appreciate it is like, why is that important? Why is it important to?
So yeah, so that's a great question. So as of now, what happens is that if you bump a contract, let's say you say the contract instance, and you say I want to bump it for 50 ledgers, I mean, the numbers are much higher, of course, but let's say for clarity that we're bumping by 50 ledgers and have a threshold of 5. What this means is that the environment check whether the code has been, I mean, whether the lifetime, or the current lifetime of the code compared with the current ledger fits within the threshold you specified, and if it does, it will bump your instance, and the same will happen for your code. But of course, the code sometimes is used by more instances, right? Whether the single instance is of course used by only the users of that specific contract. So I think that for contracts that need to be, I mean, for binaries that need to be shared among instances, this is much better because it allows to specify lower lifetimes. I mean, the specific instance, the specific contract can specify a lower time to live for the code while still keeping the same time to live for the instance, because anyways there should be other instances that use the same code that are also bumping the code, which is shared. I mean, it's the shared point, right? So that is why I think that the current design is, I mean, could be improved this way in order to, I mean, share this cost among all, I mean, better among all the users.
Okay, so there's a WASM and there's two separate protocols using it. They create two separate instances. You're basically saying that WASM should be able to bump separately from the two instances, right? I think that makes sense. I thought, I might be wrong about this, but I thought that if you were to bump an instance, that would automatically bump the WASM as well. Is that not right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's what happens currently. But the proposal is for it to happen. I mean, the developer can choose more arbitrarily how they want this to happen. So as of now, you are bumping the instance by X, let's say, and you're bumping both the instance and the code by X. What this proposal introduces is that you can say, I want to bump the instance by X and the code by Z, for example.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense to me. Moods is asking, have a look at the chat if you have a second, but Moods is asking, these are already separated when you bump your transactions/operations, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I haven't looked at the, I mean, it's extend footprint TTL, if I'm not wrong, operation. But yeah, it would make sense if these are separated in the transaction. Though what happens is that, of course, I mean, you probably know this, but I'm going to repeat it. This is for when you're dealing from within a contract, so that you are calling directly the Soroban host environment.
Okay, Dima, you join the stage.
Yeah, nothing to add really here. Like, you can bump any entry separately, but I think this is kind of orthogonal to the proposed change, because the change is about self-sustaining contracts where there is no party that extends the lifetime manually by operation. So yeah, I mean, this is a valid point, but I think it's not relevant for this particular discussion, because chances are, if you're bumping by a contract, you would like to avoid bumping by operations most of the time. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, understood. Okay, Tita, go on. I think most question was answered by you as well, Dima. And yeah, if anybody who's in the audience has any other questions, please post in the chat, and if you'd like to come on the stage too, we can do that if your questions get traction in the chat.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much it. The only thing that I think would be useful for devs hearing this is that I mean, from when the next environment release gets released, and hopefully this change will be in it. It would be great to also start thinking about how to deal with these lifetime parameters, because now you have more customizability around them. So for instance, you might want your contract to have this stored within the ledgers, right? Kind of like, for example, within the instance, so that, for example, if you see that there are more active contracts with that point to the same code of your contract, you can kind of like change the time to live and the threshold when you're bumping the code from your contract, because also other contracts are bumping it, right? So this is also something that I'm planning to do for example, like Cyclones, which is the Flash Loans protocol I've been working on, which currently has these values hard-coded, but it might be great also to start thinking, and maybe also Dima, you can hop in here to say if this makes sense. But for contract codes that are shared among many instances, it would make sense to have these TTL values within the contract storage rather than hard-coded in the code, so that you can later adapt this to fit also like the network requirements.
Yeah, definitely. I think like it is a bit early to say what are the best practices, right? We don't have too many people probably like experiencing the hierarchical system to the full degree, not included, but really seems like a good idea to have the TTL extensions to be customizable, the contract level, like you mentioned, and the instance storage, like it definitely seems to make sense, because again, like there is no clear like recommendation, you should bump by X, like it really depends on the protocol and maybe on the particular contract instance, right? So it definitely seems to make sense. And yeah, for this particular, like for the change in general, I think like I've already commented on GitHub.
Yeah,
Definitely the change makes sense. It's really low cost, like unlike the changes that we have been discussing like during the previous meetings. I don't think there are really many contention points here, because really there is no like additional metering required or additional cost times need to be introduced. It's like a very straightforward change that basically just changes the host API slightly. So I think like we've been discussing quite a bit, like what should be the threshold like for when we want to include the host function, and I think this belongs to the bucket of basically refactoring bug fixes, because admittedly this was kind of an oversight during design of this function, because we did not consider the fees too closely. So the intention was, hey, like you probably shouldn't want to only extend the TTL of the instance, because if instance outlives the code, then the contract will still be gone. But then if you take fees into consideration, and if you take contracts that have multiple instances for using the same VASM, then suddenly these might indeed become kind of probably a bit too spiky for the users of this contract, so that it makes sense to lower the contract fee. Yeah, so I think we should include it. The only thing here is that I guess the people who write an immutable contract today will not be able to be more granular in the future. So, but I would hope that most of the protocols that kind of take the basically kind of plan for the future upgrades, they should probably make their contracts upgradable. Then, if they think it is important, they can change the implementation in the next protocol version. So yeah, it's but yeah, if you get this into protocol 21, I would hope take that one get to the mainnet. So hopefully there won't be a huge amount of contracts that just are not
I think we can figure out which protocol to release to target this for maybe later. But I think what I found really helpful was Dima, your thoughts around the design, how was the design around this feature thought about? So that was super helpful. Tomar asked an interesting question. Are there risks associated with this change? Dima, quoting is probably for you.
From the network standpoint, I like from the network liveness and the maintenance costs of the environment, I don't think there are any significant risks. It kind of marginally increases the complexity of the end, right? Every function has like non-zero cost because, well, we need to add it and we need to make sure the tests are there, but I think that it's marginal enough to not worry about it. And yeah, from the network standpoint, I don't see significant risks. From the contract developer standpoint, I guess the risk is that scenario that I have mentioned, that what if someone just forgets about bumping their contract code at all and uses just the bump for the instance, and then they kind of be confused that the instance is still not there, but the contract is unusable. I guess that's the risk from the UX standpoint that hopefully could be mitigated by really just providing appropriate documentation in the SDK.
That's a good point. That's a really good
Yeah,
point.
because honestly, like there is always a risk of people just not thinking about state expiration at all, right? This is something that we cannot completely avoid, no matter how good the developer are, right? Someone would just not think about it. So it's really
Yeah, but you have a good point though, right? Like for something like this, having a set of best practices figured out would go a long way. So maybe TDEP in this proposal, if assuming that this gets accepted by the ecosystem and this is something we end up doing, maybe you should also work to include best practice and some documentation around the usage of whatever the implementation is. And actually on that note,
Yeah.
Lee asked a really good question, which I feel like is for implementation. So TDEP, I'll hand the mic back to you and you can continue. And then we'll talk about implementation whenever you feel it's the right time.
Yeah, you mean the SDK question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think when we're talking about the SDK, it's much easier to come up with the implementation. I think that the initial implementation for this change was to not separate these two functions initially, because of course what will happen at least like 99.9% of the time is that developers are bumping their instance and they're bumping their code too within the same code blocks. So initially the interface change in the environment included a function. A function that pretty much took the same. It was pretty much the same function as before, so extend contract data, instance, and code, but accepted two more parameters, which were the TTL for the code and the instance and the threshold for the code. So I think that while on the environment this design was maybe a bit too restrictive, on the SDK side we could probably have something like this. So like extend instance TTL and code TTL separately, but again still within the same function on the SDK, in order not to have duplicate functions for the contracts, which I think makes sense. But I really haven't looked at the SDK code yet, so I'm not sure what are the the practices that the dev team has taken there. But I believe that probably, to me personally, it seems like wrapping these two host functions within one SDK function that accepts four parameters, as in the first Pierre idea for this proposal could work. Probably even better than separating these two. But I mean, this is something that, of course, the folks working on the SDK can probably answer better.
Yeah, yeah.
also.
No, I would even say that maybe SDK, like you're right, SDK is maybe a later concern. Maybe first let's talk about what is the implementation that you're proposing, and then we can talk about how the SDK.
The implementation, you mean for this change?
Yeah, for the proposal itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very simple, right? It's pretty much like an interface change on the host environment. So that's why I say that probably most folks won't be affected by it, because if you're using the SDK, this is already like wrapped for you by the SDK helpers. But yeah, what happens is that you have this new extend contract instance TTL and extend contract code TTL functions that accept the contract address, the threshold, and the new TTL within. I mean, they accept these parameters, and yeah, so it's pretty much the same. Here is the code, but I don't think. I mean, it's pretty much just changing the interface and splitting the code for the extend instance and code within two functions. So it's yeah, it's very simple, and yeah.
Yep, makes sense to me. Does anybody have any other thoughts on the implementation TDAP has proposed?
Yeah, I see this discussion chat. To be clear, like the old host function will stay there. Well, functions. Like I find it highly unlikely that we will be able to remove it because someone would definitely be using it before the next protocol. So you know, old functions will be there, and we probably will not modify SDK as well to kind of not break people. It will be purely an incremental change. If we want more fine-grained control. And in terms of the SDK interface, I kind of agree that it's important to think about it. I think the idea that he has presented looks fine to me. Maybe we should try to get more creative with the naming because, yeah, instance extended to CTL kind of sounds weird. Yeah, maybe what Moods proposes.
Yep, that makes sense. Moods, actually, I see your suggestion here. You also posted in the Discord thread about this. Do you want to come on the stage and talk about your thoughts?
Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah. I don't really have much here. I think this is a good idea. I'm in support, but the only thing I really brought up was that I guess how I assume the current function works is that the code's never going to get bumped if it doesn't have to be, regardless of how many instances are trying to bump it. So I guess from my perspective, I probably wouldn't change how Blend works for this specifically because I probably would keep the extend values the same. But I mean, I personally think this is clear, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, I mean, like the fact that this, of course, like you have the thresholds, right? So it won't get updated unless it needs to. But like, I think that the like the biggest point here is that you will be able to bump the code by less, right? So this means that if there are, for example, two instances of a contract that two instances pointing to the same contract code, and one gets invoked, one bumps the instance and the code by a certain amount, and then the other does too, right? The code won't be bumped in the second one, as you say. But if you were able to set a lower lifetime for the code for the first instance in the first place, you could pay less rent on the first instance invocation and then keep the code alive, given that there are more instances that are bumping it. So it's pretty much like dividing the code, the cost for the rent by every instance. So I do think that I don't recall, I don't remember if like Blend contracts or the Governor DAO contracts were meant to, they probably are, were meant to like be used by more instances. But I think that this logic is quite solid. But let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, I agree. I just I imagine it's going to be pretty likely for like a company or XYZ to probably pay for a lot of the contract code, especially for large contracts. Just because like even if you're a user and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna cut this down to like 2 hours, I'm gonna bump it for. That's still probably gonna like double your transaction cost. So it's it probably is gonna like hit you. You're gonna be like, what? I mean, maybe that's not true, but for large contracts, it might be. And 2 hours is a pretty short bump time, anyways. So I imagine it's probably going to be pretty advantageous for folks who do develop this to probably like kick their code out as long as possible, so users don't get stuck paying for it anyway. So, but yeah, either way, I think this helps regardless.
Great.
Awesome. T-Dev, I think Lee has a question for you in the chat.
Yeah, so I think it depends on what kind of layer of complexity we want to give newer developers. But I think that probably extending both the instance and the code together will work for many users that are just beginning to play around with Soroban. But I think that for developers that need to, for people that are looking to build like more complex protocols and whatever, they probably, we probably should point them first to the fact that like the upgradability of the contract that Dima mentioned before. So like rent costs are quite, they are a very significant part of the cost model in Soroban. So we need to point them to the fact that these costs are high, and if they're working on contracts that whose code is meant to be used by more instances, so let's say a new token contract standard or liquidity pool or really any kind of pool within a protocol, I think we also should point them to the fact that this kind of level of optimization exists, and we should also point them to the fact that they can play around with these values. They could probably insert them as storage within the storage slots of the contract in order to also update this as the the network demand evolves. So yeah, I think that for the new user, keeping things as is could work fine. Probably the SDK could also like wrap up, as you say here, still keeping the extend TTL function, which just wraps the two host functions together, but then also point them to the fact that this kind of degree of optimization exists, and they probably might want to use it if they're building again contracts whose code needs to be used by many instances. I don't know if that makes sense or if I explained it correctly, but yeah, that's my point of view.
Lee, does that make sense? Lee asking you since you raised the question. Oh, you're muted, Lee.
There we go. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I guess I just wanted to understand what people felt like the default would be. And yeah, I think that makes sense.
Fantastic. Okay. I think this has been great. Does anybody else have any other questions for TDEP or any concerns? And TDEP, is there anything else that you'd like to share with everybody?
I think this is all.
Great. Well, this is like a great, it's like an awesome proposal to me. Like Tomer is saying, it seems high value. There needs to be some nuances that, be for new users, for example, and for different use cases, we do have to do some documentation here, it sounds like. But overall, the value seems fairly high. And as the core team has said, it sort of seems like low effort and low risk from a network standpoint as well. So that's always a bonus. What I'd like to do here is direct everybody's attention to the GitHub page and ask you that if you think that this should be implemented, please show your vote, cast your vote by upvoting the discussion itself. So if you go to this page, you should see the list of active discussions. You see the one that TDEP has posted, allow extending instance at CodeTTL. And then there's an add sec P256R1 that Lee had proposed earlier. And so for the context of this call, if you think that TDEP proposal is a good one and that it should be added to SOAR1, then please go and click that arrow under the discussions, click that arrow so that the core team has signal that this is an important function to add. And TDEP, I think as next steps from your point of view, I think we'll wait to see what how the community votes on this. But other than that, I would suggest you add to your proposal a proposal for SDK as well. I think we have some good suggestions here, right? Maybe add that, and then also maybe add some as suggestions, some thoughts around how you think this should be documented. I don't know if it's worth documenting right now because this proposal has not technically passed yet, right? But maybe worth adding that this should be something to be looked at.
Yeah, for sure, makes sense.
Awesome. Okay. Once again, everybody, please go and vote for Tito's proposal if you think it should be added. Beyond that, I think that's it. But let's see what Lee's saying here. Lee, a cap does make sense, I think, for this. But I think there's a couple of steps that I think we have to sort of look at first. Number one being, is there community interest in implementing this? Which I haven't seen I haven't heard any hard objections to this. Moose raised a good point, but ultimately he seems to be in favor of it. But I think it's worth for us to go and actually cast our vote on the GitHub discussion forum. And then I think we'll sort of let the core team have a deeper look at it, see what next steps they come up with, and then we'll see where cap might fit into that. Because I think we need to sort of figure out, should the cap be written by the core team here, or TDEP, or collaboration? As it will be collaboration, but it's still a little bit TBD. And it's also a question that I think is probably best addressed after we know that, this particular proposal should actually be added, which we'll know once the votes have been cast.
Yeah, I wanted to talk regarding the cap. Like, I'm not like 100% sure. Like, you want to have a cap for changes like this. What I've been thinking about, maybe we could, like, for the host functions in particular, maybe we could have like an average doc describing like the host functions motivation and functionality, and then maybe we could just put these changes into a single tab, which would be like host function bundle for protocol. And just because like the cap template has lots of stuff that is not quite relevant, especially for changes like this one. So I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of just introducing a process for the sake of process. Like, I'm not sure what exactly would we win from like going through this redundant pieces of template.
Yeah, I think
redundant rules.
there's a couple of things, right? Like the one thing is like we're getting into I think we're getting into the question of like one of the questions is like when to add a host function, when to make cap modifications. I think that is a logic question. But I think given that the agenda for today was the proposal of TDEP's proposal, I don't know if the right time to talk about what the process actually is, right? I think next steps are clear, which is just sort of go and show support for this if you want. I already see it's gotten six upvotes, so that's fantastic. And then should it be a cap, smaller cap, should be bundled with other changes or not? I think this is something we can talk about later date and probably async. I don't know if you have everybody in this call that's needed to make such decisions.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it is somewhat relevant, right? Because it's a part of the process. So I mean, we just need to, I guess, iterate on the process, because I suspect this is not the last time we would be adding new host functions. So yeah, I think it seems useful to kind of think of the process. So, yeah.
I agree. Like I think we do have to think at some point. I just don't know if it's the right time right now or not. I don't think it is. Okay. With that, TDEP's proposal has 6 votes, so that's awesome. We'll leave it open for a few more hours and see where things land, and we'll follow up async. Beyond that, does anybody have anything else to comment about this proposal, or TDEP? Is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Oh yeah, that's all on my side.
Amazing. Okay. Well then, thank you everybody. This is it for today's protocol meeting.